This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. The Browns' situation this offseason, when it comes to one of the most important positions in the sport, the quarterback position, is not a strong position right now, right? They don't have any clear answers on any of the quarterbacks on their roster. Dillon Gabriel was not very promising in the starts that you saw Dillon Gabriel out there with. He's also somebody who lacks prototypical size, and that's being polite about Dillon. When we talk about Shedeur Sanders, lots of ups, lots of downs, a lot more downs towards the end of his run in Cleveland at the end of the season. Big questions about where he's going to be by the start of the next camp and if he's even going to be capable of starting for the team at a high level, or at least a high enough level to play winning football for the Browns. And then there's Deshaun Watson, who, I mean, come on, like at this point, right? It feels like 5 years ago we were hoping that Deshaun Watson would look like 2020 Deshaun Watson. Now we have, like, some fans have debased themselves into hoping that Deshaun can return to 2023 form. And I don't think that's possible. Like, we went from hoping that he turned back to 2020 top 5 quarterback form in 2023, and now we're begging for 2023 Deshaun Watson. It just shows you how much of a failure the trade was. But yeah, like Deshaun Watson, he looked like that throwing shoulder injury that took him out in 2023 really had an effect on his ability to throw the football. And I don't know if that ability's coming back. It looked pretty cooked in 2024. You add 2 Achilles tears on top of that, which is going to affect his ability to create explosion with his lower base, which is going to affect arm strength, even though it's not necessarily his arm that's injured, right? You know, you can go back to remembering like how Tiger Woods fell apart as a golfer because he couldn't really get his lower half in line. That's the same thing with throwing the football. There's just no compelling reason to think that Deshaun Watson's going to be a compelling player to play. So you got uncertainty at least with the rookie quarterbacks, right? Shedeur's very uncertain. The Dillon Gabriel extremely uncertain, and then Deshaun Watson, I don't even think that's a viable option there. So that's where you are at quarterback right now. It's not the most appealing place. And unfortunately for the Cleveland Browns, it's not an obvious quarterback solution that's going to be available to them. They don't have the number 1 overall pick. So Fernando Mendoza does not seem like a possibility for them. That would have been a good solution, but that's not there. You can look at free agency. There's not really a clear-cut quarterback solution. There's guys that you might be able to hope for, but everybody comes with pros and cons. It's available in free agency at this point. There's nobody who's even reaching the level of a Sam Darnold last year coming available on the market. If you look at the quarterbacks available after Fernando Mendoza, it doesn't look great. And if you look at every other option, trades, again, everybody comes with their own baggage. So the real question is, what is the path forward for the Cleveland Browns? What do the Browns do now that they're at this uncertain place? I think they have 3 options, and we're going to talk through all 3 of those options today. There's option number 1, which is the Browns can decide to go all in on the 2027 draft class at quarterback, which is exactly what it sounds like. Straight up, we're talking about tanking. That's option 1. Not my favorite option, not the option that I would advocate for, but it does have its pros. It does have its cons. We'll talk about that once we get there. The second option is the if you build it, hopefully they will come, right? Which is the idea of focusing on becoming a strong landing spot for a quarterback if a quarterback is to become available via trade or free agency, right? This is how The Broncos tried to run, and unironically, it got them Russ. Same thing happened with Cleveland in 2022. They were a good landing spot. They got Deshaun Watson. It did not end up working out. Now, there's been times where it has worked out, right? Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, Peyton Manning in Denver. It's kind of that philosophy. Just build everything but the quarterback and pray by hook or crook that a quarterback becomes available to you, right? There's also a variant of this idea, this if you build it, they will come idea, of putting everything in place to make the life of whatever whatever second tier quarterback prospect you go after to be able to reach their ceiling. So if you want to go after somebody who's considered more of a project, let's say a DJ Lagway next year, or maybe a Aiden Childs, or maybe a Lenore Sellers, right? Like if you want to go after somebody who's a bit of a project, maybe make their life a little easier, or like a high tier reclamation, like an Anthony Richardson or something like that, right? If that's what you want to do, that's also another variant of that strategy. That's one way to go. The third way to go is the tried and true. It's kind of reminds me of the Arrested Development quote where Tobias is talking to his wife, and they're talking about couples therapy or something like that. And he's saying like, yeah, it never works, but maybe it can work for us, right? That is option number 3. It is a solution that does not have a track record of working out great, but everybody talks themselves into it being something that you might be able to do because you're usually in a situation where you have to believe that you can do that. And that is the QBs don't matter philosophy, where you just try to build a team that can win without a quarterback, and you just look at the 2000 Ravens and pray that you could do the same thing that they did. Again, pros and cons to building a team like that. And we're going to discuss that. But before I get to that, got to thank my sponsor today, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. All right, so let's talk about option 1, the go all in on quarterback in 2027. Now, is this a decision you can make from the outright start of the season? No. Right? I think that's probably a con. You cannot go into the season with this being the plan. You can pivot to this being the plan halfway through the season, but you cannot go into the season with this as the plan. The upside of this strategy, right, which is just going all in on the 2027 draft class, is pretty simple. That would be the most commonly successful way of acquiring a franchise quarterback. Like the way that most teams find their franchise quarterback is by drafting them in the top 5. That is how most teams do it, right? If we're looking for the most successful way of doing it, the most common way of doing it, drafting a quarterback who is worth a top 5 pick in the top 5 is the most common way to do it. The problem with this strategy is, as easy as that sounds, the logistics of this are just completely insane. One, you're going to have to lose games. What does that require? Because Myles Garrett is not going to go out there and want to lose games on purpose. He's been very vocal about that. Denzel Ward is not going to go out there and want to lose games on purpose, right? That's been something that he's been vocal about as well. This probably requires you trading people that you really don't want to trade. Not really any of the young guys, right? None of the guys you drafted recently, but you might have to consider doing something insane, which is trading Myles Garrett at the peak of his powers, right as he's become Superman level player, which I would not be a fan of. You would definitely have to trade Denzel Ward. You would have to ship off a lot of the veterans on the roster, one, to get draft capital for the 2027 class because you don't have extra draft capital for that class, but also, two, to ensure that you're bad enough to be able to get the draft pick that's necessary. Because as bad as the Cleveland Browns were last year, they won 5 games. They won 5 games last year. Sure, they came 2 wins away from getting the number 1 overall pick, but they won 5 games last year. They're probably going to get better next year. So in order for this team to get worse, I mean, you got to get rid of some big pillars to get worse enough to get the pick that you need to get a quarterback. Here's the other issue with this. We don't know what that 2027 draft class is going to be. I thought the 2026 class would be significantly stronger than the 2025 class. It's only stronger because Fernando Mendoza is in this draft class, right? If there was no Mendoza, this class would be just as weak as last year's draft class. That's the only thing separating it. This year's class did not pan out the way that we had hoped that it panned out. There's no guarantee that the 2027 draft class is going to pan out that way either, especially when we're looking at people who have a lot of shakiness in their career so far. Got Arch Manning, who's factored in on this. Dylan Raiola is not even in the 2027 conversation anymore because he's not even going to start because Dante Moore is back at Oregon. So no Dylan Raiola anymore here. DJ Lagway hasn't played a good season of football yet. Lenore Sellers has only had 8 good games so far in his college football career. There's a lot of shakiness with this 2027 draft class when we're talking about prospects who are going to be sitting at the top of it. I know people throw out names like Julian Sand and Darian Mensah, but the reality is probably likely that those guys aren't first-round picks, especially like Darian Mensah, who got a day 3 grade back from the draft board this year, which is why he did not leave Duke, despite wanting to leave Duke very badly this offseason. So if you're counting on Mensah to be like a top-tier pick for you, I don't think that's going to happen, right? I think that's going to be another situation where people are just assuming that somebody's draft value is going to be super high, but it's not. And if you're going to go all in on a draft class, you want to go all in on a draft class that has 4 or 5 quarterbacks available. And it has at least 3 guys that anchor the class going into it. Right now, this one has 2, right? There's Arch Manning, and that's mainly because of name value. And then there's legitimately Dante Moore. Other than that, it's all crapshoot. We could be talking about completely different names by the end of the year. And if you go all in on this draft class, which means moving off of some of your better veteran players, and it nets you not a great selection of quarterbacks, well, you're going to feel like a fucking asshole. Sorry to mince my words there, but you're going to feel like you are the Wile E. Coyote trying to chase the Roadrunner, and you blew up Acme Dynamite in your face because that's what you would have done. There's a lot of risk involved in going all in on the 2027 class. There is the benefit of, hey, this is how most teams solve their quarterback problems. But that also comes with the most risk because, again, how are you going to be bad enough to get the pick that you need to? Are you planning on being worse than you were last year? Even if you're the same that you were last year, you win 5 games this year, that's not going to be enough to land you a quarterback. You got to be 3 or 4 win bad. Are you going to be 3 or 4 win bad next year? I don't anticipate it. Browns are going to get a better offensive line, some wider receivers. Even if they run it back at the same position with the same players at quarterback, they're going to get better out of them, right? We're probably looking at 6 to 7 wins, if you just run it back, which is why you would probably have to either be significantly injured by the time you make this pivot, which nobody hopes for, or you're going to have to trade some guys. Significant risk. And that's not even to mention all the risk that comes with tanking. Tanking's terrible. I hate tanking. Like, losing games at the end of the year when you're already eliminated to the playoffs, I have no problem with that, right? Like, if you are eliminated from the playoffs, you can't make it, you're already, okay, you do whatever you want to do at that point. I'm not going to really trip one way or the other. But if you're going into the season, like, you have a chance to make the playoffs because it's the beginning of the season and everybody does, and you're actively not trying to win, oh, that shit destroys teams. It does, right? Like, anytime the team just goes into it, one, they don't even get the results that they want from the tanking, and two, it just destroys morale. You do whatever you want after you're eliminated from the playoffs, or if you had a bunch of injuries and that shoots the season, okay, that's a different conversation to have. But if we're just talking about going into the season day one tanking, oh man, that's just a bad idea. So that's option number one. Option number two is a little bit more compelling, I think, to most people. If you build it, they might come. That's what I'm going to call this, right? If you build it, they might come. Shout out to Field of Dreams, which is the inspiration for this one. This has worked for teams, right? I mentioned Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos got a Super Bowl out of this. This happened with Tampa Bay. And Tom Brady got a Super Bowl out of this. The Rams, they got a Super Bowl out of this with Matt Stafford. I think you guys are starting to kind of hear a common thread here that might make this a little bit difficult for the Browns, but I'll just go ahead and say it. Look at the places that have been successful with this strategy. They are places that are traditional, attractive spots for free agents. Talking about LA, talking about Denver, John Elway. We're talking about Tom Brady in Tampa. These are done in locations that are typically places that people want to play and aren't held down by the baggage of being bad for like 20 years. So the real question is, do the Browns have the clout organizationally to even pull this kind of shit off? It's one thing to fantasize about it, but if you buy into the whole build it and they will come strategy and the quarterback becomes available, let's say, Joe Burrow would be impossible to get because he's in division. But let's consider that, right? Like, let's say Joe Burrow's the quarterback that comes available. And that looks like that could happen. Because Joe Burrow, Cincinnati Bengals, they're not getting along great. But if it is Joe Burrow that becomes available, well, the Browns aren't in the running because the Bengals aren't going to trade him in division. So you would have done this whole, we're going to build it so that we can land a quarterback thing and have no real way to land a quarterback because the guy who happens to be available is in your division. Or, if you do this strategy, and let's say, who's another quarterback that could become available? Let's say C.J. Stroud, right? He has a bounce-back season, but doesn't re-sign with the Texans for whatever reason, and he's available. He didn't leave the best taste in anybody's mouth after the 4 interceptions he threw in the playoffs. But let's say he bounces back from that. He becomes available. Is Cleveland going to be where he wants to land? There might be a chance because, he went to Ohio State. Cleveland's in Ohio. But if a team in a more attractive spot becomes available, let's say Tampa Bay clears out Baker Mayfield, and that becomes available. Let's say, just for argument's sake, Matt Stafford retires and LA becomes available. Is he going to be more attracted to LA than Cleveland? Because traditionally, that's something that happened. Hell, the last time the Browns tried to do this, it did not work out with Deshaun Watson. But it took a franchise-changing, altering bag of money to be dropped on his front door in order to get it to happen because he wanted to go to Atlanta. That's the big flaw with that strategy. Now, the pros to that strategy is, hey, this has worked. This has landed teams Super Bowls before. You can't say that with every strategy. Like, this has worked. This has landed teams Super Bowls. You can make something happen with this. The Rams, a current example, they might win their second Super Bowl by getting Matthew Stafford. It is also a more satisfying way to use your next 3 years if you're a Browns fan, because they're not committed to being terrible. They're actually trying to be good. They're actually trying to find solutions. Like, you would feel a lot better about the organization over the next few years if they went down this road. And it wouldn't require having to sit through another dreadful, painful season like you had to sit through last year. So it does have its perks. You just got to ask yourself, do you think Cleveland can benefit do you think Cleveland is a team that can build a situation so attractive that it would draw a quarterback here? That's the big elephant in the room with that one, right? Is the barrier of the geographical location of the team going to be a problem? Or by the time you do this, you're going to be so close to that dome that maybe that sells it for you. But who knows? That's going to be a big concern going forward if you do go with that strategy. There's a variant to the strategy I mentioned earlier that I think would be more or less where the Browns would probably be, which is build a good team, find a journeyman to quarterback the team, hopefully, efficiently enough to where you don't have to bench them. And that allows you time to develop a project at quarterback that might not go super early because they're not refined, but has the tools to be the kind of quarterback that you need going forward, right? If you want to do the Jordan Love, that's what Green Bay did, right? This is very similar to what they did with Jordan Love, where Jordan Love was a raw prospect coming out of, I think, Utah State or something like that. And they just spent the next few years working on Jordan Love, getting him to the point to where they need to, and then boom, played him. Same thing happened with Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. Hey, we got enough here. We could take a chance on a more risky prospect, but hopefully that pans out. It's certainly a lot better than trying to go after he could be Kirk Cousins in the first round, right? This gives you more upside choices in the first round. That's probably the route Cleveland would have to go down. The idea of another superstar quarterback coming here after the whole Deshaun Watson debacle, probably not going to happen. You know what I mean? I don't even know what the Browns management's appetite would be for that at this point after Watson flopped so hard. I think you would probably have to lean towards that variant of hey, we'll build it. We'll get it to a point to where we could sit a guy with tools for a year or two and then play him, which is a valid strategy. And that strategy has produced championship teams, right? The Kansas City Chiefs are an example of that. You can even include the Green Bay Packers. They did it with Aaron Rodgers, who wasn't as raw as Jordan Love coming out of college, but still, needed some development there. So maybe that can be a valid pathway for the Browns going forward. Certainly comes with its negatives, certainly comes with its concerns, but, hey, you don't got a fucking tank, right? I think that beats tanking. I'd rather do that than tank, me personally. The third option is, again, everybody deludes themselves into being yeah, we could do this. The 2000 Ravens did it. We could do it. And that is the idea that quarterbacks don't matter. We're going to try to just get somebody we think could be serviceable at quarterback. This is we draft Ty Simpson because we think he could be Bo Nix or something like that. Or what people you think Ty Simpson could be very average quarterback, Kirk Cousins in his prime, right? That level of quarterback. And you just do everything you can to make it so it doesn't matter that that's your quarterback. This strategy has its issues, right? The pro to this strategy would be you could do this right now, right? That's the pro. If you want the Browns to win 9 or 10 games as fast as possible, This is the way to do that. This is the quickest way to do that. Everything else, we're talking about a little bit more time here, right? If you're waiting on a 2027 class, it's sacrificing this season. If you're going to do the build it and they will come thing, well, then that means that you're probably going to build out everything, no investment at quarterback this year, and then just see what 2027 brings to your table. So you're probably going to have a limit on your success in 2026. But if you just go all in on saying, fuck it, we don't want a quarterback, we're just going to try to win without a quarterback, you can win 9 games like that. You can maybe even win 10. Hell, sometimes you can win 11 games like that. This is the strategy that the Vikings have employed. And I think more fittingly, the Colts have employed, right? The Colts are the we don't care about quarterback team right now. And here's the problem with the we don't care about quarterback build. That shit's all good when it's going well. But ultimately what you're building when you're building a team that's not reliant on the quarterback position is you're building a very fragile house of cards. And what that means is that you don't have a high margin of error. Something goes wrong during the season's in the can, right? Hey, look at Minnesota and look at the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts, Daniel Jones pops that Achilles, boom, season over. They almost went under 500. You look at the Minnesota Vikings, they went from almost getting the 1 seed last year to nothing. They stink. That is the margin of error of building a team like that. It is almost impossible to have sustainable success that way. You are very likely to have one good season and then boom, back to being bad. It literally just happened to the Browns in 2023 where they were built like a quarterback, we don't care who the quarterback is team, and that was successful. You won 11 games with it in 2023 and then boom, you're back to being dog shit the next year. It's very possible to do that because you don't have a floor, because your quarterback play is poor. You're trying to elevate it by putting all this fancy stuff around it. But at the end of the day, it's going to matter that you don't got a quarterback. Like, I'm not even talking about doing what the Eagles do, right? The Eagles kind of built like this, but Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than what we're talking about the Browns are going to have access to over the next few years. So how do you build a team to do what the Eagles do with less margin of error than the Eagles have when you have a worse quarterback than the Eagles have? It's not possible. And look how thin the Eagles' margin of error is. They won the Super Bowl last year. They were bounced in the first round this year. The quarterback don't matter team, it sounds fun. You might win some games quick, but that margin of error is no joke. And it comes for everybody. And we literally just witnessed it. I don't like building teams like that. I don't think that's a great way to go. I think you can delude yourself into thinking it can work for about a year, but eventually the bill's going to come due. You got to find a way to get something at quarterback that you could be happy with. And I don't think you could just ignore the position or try to get away with spare parts at the position. It's a premium position for a reason. It's a very high-paid position for a reason. And it's very, very difficult to make a run to the Super Bowl with a quarterback who's not that good. It's happened before, sure. But the examples of this happening are few and far between and have been less and less frequent over the last 10 years. Right? The last example is maybe with the Eagles with Nick Foles. And that was just a playoff run. They had an MVP caliber quarterback that year in Carson Wentz for the bulk of the regular season that got them the 1 seed that put them in a position to do the things that they did in the playoffs. So even that example is not really like a quarterback don't matter build. It just happened to play out like that. Have my doubts about building a team like this. I think we have seen the ceiling you run into building a team. I mean, this is what Mike Tomlin has tried to do the last 5 years in Pittsburgh. It hasn't even netted a playoff win. I think this is a way to lock yourself in to never solving the quarterback problem. For me, we want to do this. If this is what the Browns are going to have to do, I would say option 2 is what I would want to go with. Let's just build around the quarterback position, not make any long-term investments right now, and hope that we can luck into a project player in the 2027 draft that we can develop, and we have the kind of environment that can develop that player, or we become a nice soft landing spot for a veteran quarterback looking for a change of scenery. Other than that, I think going all in on the 2027 draft and trying to suck, unless it ends up that way, right, it's not a good strategy to go into the season knowing you're going to tank. I don't think that's going to end with good results. And then if you do have to trade guys to make sure you're that bad, I don't know if you're going to be able to bounce back and be the team that you want to be as fast as possible if you have to get rid of Miles, if you have to get rid of Denzel. And then option 3, which is the quarterbacks don't matter build. It always sounds fun on paper. It always ends with frustration. So, I think option 2 is really the only viable plan for the Browns. But if you have a different plan or you want to tell me what you think about these 3 options, let me know in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.